So could you give the audience a just sort of brief rundown and describe this 30 hits of acid experience that you had?
Sure. So in a nutshell, basically, I was working at a coffee shop in Tempe, Arizona, down on Mill Avenue called Coffee Plantation. And one day I was getting off, and it's like one of the hippie guys. He's like, "Hey man, thanks for all the food. Feel like getting high?" I'm like, "Sure." And he's like, "Open your mouth." And I thought he was like gonna throw like a tab or something in there. I had gotten tabs from this guy before, so that's kind of what I was expecting. And then all of a sudden he like put something like that, and he squirts something in my mouth, and like I could feel it like running down my throat. And he was like, "Whoa, man, you gonna be high." I was like 20 or 30 hits of acid. Didn't know what to expect, and they were taking more than like 3 or 4 hits. And it kicked in so fast, like I was like high like within 15, 20 minutes. Missed my bus. I got off the wrong stop. I'm like tripping balls, can't see what I'm doing. I have no fucking like. I almost didn't know, like, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I almost felt like my equilibrium. Like, I didn't know if I was like sideways or up. It's hard to explain, but I was fucked. Like, you think of how like the drunkest you've ever been and trying to walk right, holding onto the walls and shit. I was like that. I think people thought I was like just hammered. Like, I sat next to this canal and talked to myself for a while, and tripped for about 2 days maybe.
Merging with simulator in 3, 2, 1.
Everybody, welcome back to the Launchpad podcast. Today I have with me Mr. Zach here, and Zach is more famously known by his YouTube handle. He went viral back in, what was it, like 2009 or something like that, for a video, and he called it, he is known as the 30 hits of acid guy. Essentially, he had this crazy experience somewhere around 20 years ago where he took 30 hits of acid, talked about it on YouTube, and has been known as the 30 hits of acid guy ever since by the internet community. So, Zach, welcome to the Launchpad podcast, man.
Thanks, man. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, dude. So could you give the audience a just sort of brief rundown and describe this 30 hits of acid experience that you had? How did that come to be?
Sure. So in a nutshell, basically, I was working at a coffee shop in Tempe, Arizona, down on Mill Avenue called Coffee Plantation. It's no longer there. It's been there for years, but and there's these homeless kids that used to hang out back there, hang out like on Mill Avenue and stuff. And I used to like put all these pastries outside when I cleaned up and stuff at the end of the night. I'm just gonna toss them anyway. They're appreciative and shit. Kind of like made friends with them a little bit. And one day I was getting off, and it's like one of the hippie guys. They're like kind of like squatters. Back then we called them squatters. I don't know what they call them. Anyway, they were like, he's like, "Hey man, thanks for all the food. Feel like getting high?" It's like, "Sure." And he's like, "Open your mouth." And I thought he was like gonna throw like a tab or something in there. I had gotten tabs from this guy before, so that's kind of what I was expecting. And then all of a sudden he like put something like that, and he like squirts something in my mouth. I was like, "What the fuck?" And like I could feel it like running down my throat. And he was like, "Whoa, man, you gonna be high?" I was like 20 or 30 hits of acid. I was like, I got a little scared. I was like, "What the fuck?" And then I like jammed home, and I tried to get home on my bus. Didn't know what to expect, and they were taking more than like 3 or 4 hits. And 3 or 4 hits, you're pretty fucking high, right? So I didn't even know what to expect. And it kicked in so fast, like I didn't even have time to like get home. And the bus ride should have been like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. I was like high like within 15, 20 minutes. Missed my bus. I got off the wrong stop. I'm like tripping balls, can't see what I'm doing. I have no fucking like. I almost didn't know, like, it's kind of hard to explain. Like, I almost felt like my equilibrium. Like, I didn't know if I was like sideways or up. It's hard to explain, but I was fucked. Like, you think of how like the drunkest you've ever been and trying to walk right, holding onto the walls and shit. I was like that. I think people thought I was like just hammered like that, which is probably better than if they knew what I was really on. But that was it, man. I mean, I sat next to this canal and talked to myself for a while, and tripped for about 2 days maybe. It's hard to say. I finally I took a bunch of Xanax and NyQuil and shit. And was able to kind of towards the end, but it was an experience. It's an experience.
No, it's super intriguing to me because like I've taken some pretty large doses of LSD myself, and I've always found that to be a pretty unique experience. And it's kind of hard to find other people who have pushed that boundary because there's something with LSD. I think sometimes people are they're more likely to take a large dose of mushrooms or something like that and feel a little bit more comfortable with that. But with LSD and it having that synthetic edge, I think that, and plus there's a sort of lore behind LSD, you know, like getting stuck in the trip or whatever it is. And so, you know, you had this experience that with 30 hits. I want to know, like, in that moment on 30 hits of acid, what was the body load like? Because in my experience, the times that I've taken really large doses of LSD, the body load is so severe that essentially all I can do, it feels like, is lay down somewhere, and it's almost like my body is in this sort of like catatonic state. It's very similar to like a K-hole or something where there's a lot of psychedelia going on, but it gets to the point where it's slightly confusing or very confusing psychedelia, and my body is just like melting into my bed.
Yeah, man, for sure. I had some of that going on too, where I felt like it took all my energy just to kind of like just to stand up straight and just to move. And I had like I remember I had a backpack on, and it just felt like it was like I felt like it might have been a Volkswagen Beetle. It was so heavy, and I was just like you know. And I tried to walk, and I sat down next to the canal. Part of it was exhaustion, man. And I probably walked like 20 yards maybe, and I was just done, like done. I just sat there and like kind of melted into the dirt and stuff, and like watch these canal go around and like shit coming out of the canal. And then I'm like, am I in the canal or am I on the side of the canal? I don't know. Am I swimming? Should I hold my breath up? But yeah, it was pretty hard, man. You know, the whole thing
Yeah,
about
no,
the lore about the permanent trip, that was the one thing that fucked with me, man, because I was like, I had heard that too. We all heard that shit, you know. Guy got puddled at a dead show. Well, that was back in the 90s. Now it's probably like, dude got puddled at a festival, you know, whatever. And it's like, it's the same story, just, you know, rewritten for the next generation. And it's like, I was like, no, man. The way I heard it was like, guy's like tripping out, never comes back, and like thinks he's a thing of orange juice or something stupid like that, you know. And so that's like the psychedelic folklore. I'm like, I'm done. I'm done. That's it. Like, I'm not coming back. Like, this my life is pretty much over as I know. That was pretty much. But thankfully, I did come back.
yeah. Yeah, no, man, and I'm sure you've heard of this. There's this new sort of phenomenon that's been gaining more and more traction in the psychedelic community and being talked about, and that is the phenomenon of HPPD, which stands for hallucinatory persisting perception disorder, and it's essentially like whenever you sober up from the psychedelic experience, you're still experiencing these psychedelic like effects that bleed into your everyday normal life. And now HPPD is weird because like some people have it from taking small doses, some people get it from taking large doses, and then, you know, some people talk about how it's this massively debilitating on their lives and they hate living with it, and some people have found ways to live with it and can even enjoy it. And you know, I had a little stint myself where I was binging on psychedelics quite a bit at the age of 19, and I went through like this 2 to 3 month window where things were weird, man. I was disassociating from my life, and things were breathing when they shouldn't be, and just feeling this sort of slight psychedelia, especially whenever I smoked weed. I noticed that whenever I smoked weed, it was like this doorway just opened up. But like, I want to know, after having taken that 30 hits of acid, because back then, whenever you did it, there wasn't this sort of all these resources for you to look at and say, oh, well, maybe I have HPPD. Did you experience any sort of like lingering effects from this event? And like, well, how did you deal with that?
Well, as far as the HPPE, yeah, I wasn't familiar with that term up until like maybe 5 years ago. But I started taking acid when I was like maybe 14. And so like by the time I was 15 or 16, I was tripping like every week, and I did so for a good part of a year and a half. And I did notice that when I started doing that, like at a certain point, even if I didn't take any acid for like a week, I would still see the tracers, like, you know. And it's like I would still see the tracers. If I focused on a wall, I would see the breathing and stuff. I looked down at the carpet at school, you know. We're trying to read a textbook at school, and the words just kind of like, yeah. And I don't know if that actually ever went away or if I just like got used to it, because I think I still have it, but it's like it's been so long, I don't know. And I guess I adapted to it because I still see tracers, but I don't even remember what's normal anymore, because it's like, when, you know, if you carry it around so long, it's like, I don't know. I think your brain kind of maybe kind of compensates for it a little bit, kind of like, tunes in a little
Yeah.
bit, turns a little knob over here, a little knob over here to make it kind of straight again. And the 30 hits though,
Y-
yeah, that was like more so like a body feeling weird. It was like not so much that the headspace was kind of fucked. It was kind of cloudy headed for like a solid week. Like I'm sure you're taking a lot of acid, taking 3, 4 hits. That that next day you had that like acid hangover. It was like that, but instead of lasting a day, maybe a day and a half, which I was used to and kind of expecting, it lasted for like 4 or 5 days. Um, Other than that, though, man, after about 4 or 5 days, I was pretty good. After 4 or 5 days, I mean, the body high, like I was sore. I was like, my body was like, I felt like I had like aged like 20 years, like, and I like my muscles are kind of cramped up and stuff, and like I could never like get comfortable. I was always like sitting and like I'm like always shifting, like I couldn't just quite put my ass in the chair. Like I don't know why, but in about 5 days, I was back pretty much back to normal. I mean, I had like people checking me because people were like worried too, like especially with my roommates at the time, kind of worried, like, you okay. People trying to get me to go to the doctor. I'm like, what's he gonna do? What am I gonna tell him? Go, I took too much drugs. Can you help me? But I don't know. Like, of course they'd be like, dude, say no to drugs. It's your brain on drugs. Like, hey, back in the '90s, like, yeah, that'd be it. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's hard to say because people are like, what do you think you'd be like if you didn't do that? Like, you think that had a permanent effect on psyche or your emotional health? And I don't know because you don't know what you would be like if you never got on that bus. And who knows what I'd be like?
Yeah.
I mean, could be worse, could be better, who knows, for good or bad. But I'm glad I had the experience. So I mean, I want to do it again, but I'm glad that in hindsight that I had that experience because it's unique, and I mean, it's a big difference between 20 or 30 hits and 3 or 4 hits, and it's a completely new animal. But I'll tell you this though, man, even at 20, 30 hits, man, I've never tripped as hard as I have on DMT. DMT is the shit. Like acid, kind of like, in my opinion, at this point, acid's kind of like for high school kids, in my opinion. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still enjoy it, but it's kind of like, you know, yeah, DMT is like that. That's just a whole new animal. Like, I don't care how tough you are and how big of a heroic dose you think you can handle. You know, do a fucking dab of DMT on a fucking, you know, it, yeah, that's it. The conversation is over at that point. You know what I'm saying? I like it.
Yeah, no, that was segue perfectly into something that, I really wanted to ask you is, how does that 30 hits of acid headspace compare to something like DMT? And, so you've experienced the large doses of acid and you experiment with DMT quite regularly. That's one thing I've experienced, man. It's like I've taken these extremely large doses of both mushrooms and LSD, and neither one of them has really even got me like close to the DMT realm. I have had a couple experiences with high dose mushrooms where it's like I'm in the DMT waiting room or something like that, almost like there's a feeling of another presence there with me, but it's not the same, just getting as taking that free DMT freebase to the face and just getting catapulted into that other realm, you know what I mean? And like there's something that kind of happens within the DMT experience. I was talking about this on a recent podcast, but it's almost like there's this feeling of like a story being played out and some sort of resolution, like this little tiny mini like hero's journey that seems to happen, at least to me, a lot within my DMT experience, where it's like, like there's a completion of something, and yeah, I've purposely taken these large doses of LSD and mushrooms trying to replicate that and extend that experience, but haven't been able to do so.
Yeah, I know they classify DMT as a psychedelic, which it is, but man, it really is night and day difference though as far as how far you can blast off. Like, to make an analogy, like, if you can take enough acid and shrooms, to get to the moon, DMT will get you out of this galaxy. If you can
Yeah.
do it correctly. I mean, I don't know about you, but it took me a good 20 or 30 times before I figured out how to actually do it, how to break through, you know, how not to waste my fucking shit. Like, what happened? It's like, but yeah, once you figure that shit out, Jesus, then, it's weird, man, because, like, I hear all those stories, like from Joe Rogan and shit, like, just, on social media about, aliens and, hold hands with aliens and fly around Saturn and sing Kumbaya and have a spiritual experience. Maybe you guys, maybe it's because I listen to too much fucking Slayer, man. But my shit, man, when I blast off, it's about 50-50 going, I'm going to come back crying and scared. Like, it's you might as well flip a coin. You going to dance with aliens or you going to fucking burn in hell and your teeth will fall out and blood comes pouring out of your eyes. So I've had that shit too. That's not fun, man. But
Yeah, no,
I've never taken, even on acid, man, I've never had that experience. Like, where you just don't even know what happened. Like, I wake up on the ground and, like, my DMT pipe's over there, and I'm like, okay, I'm not on fire. Where am I? I look around. What happened? About 10 seconds, you really don't know what the fuck happened. And I'm like, oh,
yeah,
yeah. And then I look up at the camera, and it's like, oh, it's recording. Oh, I want to see what happened.
yeah, yeah, dude. No, there's I've had a few, difficult DMT trips myself, and it's very different than having like a normal DMT trip because I've done DMT a lot of times, and I've had this handful of difficult experiences, and it's kind of like you're describing. In the difficult experiences, there is that amnesic effect of like, some part of you knows that you like took this drug and are like doing this thing, but there's also this like confusion and forgetfulness that can pair with it. That honestly just only kind of can add to the fear that's in there. But like, and this is a good point that you're bringing up, because a lot of times when people talk about DMT, what they talk about is the sort of, they can glorify it and talk about the beautiful aspects of it, the aliens or the angels, or this visionary thing that I saw. And like, a majority of my experiences has been just that. But also these bad ones, man, like they're like I'm convinced that your average bear out there, like your average person, does not need to experience that, like the bad DMT trip, because I don't hold like a lot of, I feel like most people would have a hard time grappling with that experience and truly coming back from it. I mean, like, how do you feel about your bad DMT experiences, man? Do you look at them and like with sort of like gratitude, like I needed that? That's sort of how I look at mine. Like, oh, that was a time in my life where like I probably needed like a hard message there. But
I try to look, I try to, even on acid, when I have a bad trip, I try to think to myself, there's no really such thing as a bad trip, right? I mean, obviously you have some struggles you're going through, some anxiety, whatever it is, you want to, subconscious demons that you're wrestling with. But man, yeah, the DMT though, man, it's like, yeah, I just, I don't know. I looked down at my drawers. I'm like, oh, good, I didn't shit myself. Great. Well, that's a good day, because like I should have, because it's like, I thought I was on fire. My teeth are falling on my face, and you have this feeling like of imminent death, like that you're really dying, and it's not like a nightmare. I mean, it kind of is similar to a nightmare in dreams. As realistic as dreams are, you can blast off hard on DMT. It's like an instant dream state, and you don't have any control over it. At least in your dreams, I don't know about you, but I can kind of lucid dream a little bit. Once I realize I'm dreaming, then I can kind of like fucking do what I want. But DMT, it's like when you're out there in that realm, you don't even know you're a high on DMT. You don't even know what's going on. It's like you're like transported, like Star Trek, and like put somewhere else, and like hopefully it drops you on a friendly planet, because it doesn't, man. It's like, yeah, I mean, man, what's weird, and I guess it maybe has to do with the ego death, like, experience that, but maybe that's what it is, because there's been a couple times where I could hear like the sirens going off when I hit, off of like a Yokan, just, it was like, and I knew like I got a good hit. All of a sudden, like I got this tunnel vision, and like I was like in a different room, but I could hear this thing like an old Atari game going, like when the character dies, it goes wah, 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 wah. It was like, I heard that shit, and then I heard these
oh,
voices going, he didn't do it. No, he didn't do it. No. We told him he didn't do it. He didn't just do that, did he? He's in for it now. He's gonna get it now. I'm like, I didn't even know I just hit DMT, right? I'm like, who the fuck is talking to me? And then it's like, but then you think about it, like in your trip, who the fuck was that talking? Is that your ego, like fucking being like motherfucker? Like, you know what I'm saying? I don't know.
yeah,
Psychiatrist. I wish we could give some like Freud some DMT. That'd be the shit. Like, instead of cocaine, just like swap it with DMT. Yeah.
yeah, Yeah, no, dude, I've experienced the same thing and it's not necessarily like this, like out loud sort of noise, but I've had those like it's a very like somatic feeling, like those sort of like vibrations or hums that's almost musical within the DMT experience. And yeah, I remember this one time I was coming back into my body and I just kept having the chant, the like like coming back into my body, and it kept repeating itself, you know. But yeah, like, and it was like I was saying, like this DMT itself gets glorified a lot, and there is always that woo-woo esoteric edge to it of like, well, it's us tapping into another realm. And see, this is where like I'm kind of at odds with people sometimes because like I remain open to all of that. Like maybe it is some spiritual realm, maybe it is God, maybe it is these other things. And when I experience it, it does feel that way within the experience. But I also remain skeptical at all times because I feel like that's one of the highest forms of like love and appreciation that you can show something is like true skepticism and also remaining humble enough to admit that like maybe I don't know what the fuck is going on here. Have you ever met somebody who's smoked DMT a bunch of times or done ayahuasca a bunch of times, and they carry themselves with this arrogance and this attitude of just like like holier than thou. If you just understood what I understand, then like any sort of guru like this, I become very disillusioned with anybody like this who acts like this sort of guru and like they have it fucking figured out. Because one of the things that consistently gets shown to me every time I go back to the DMT space is the limitations of our human form, right? And there's this sort of like knowing that what I'm looking at can't be fully understood by like human Gabe, and that's okay, And so for people to come back from that experience and to carry themselves in this way of, well, now I have the ultimate cosmic secret, it kind of bothers me sometimes, man. So I appreciate people who remain skeptical, but I also have met individuals who are so skeptical that I think that that can also be a hindrance. Like they're so skeptical that they shut themselves off to the idea of it being anything mystical or woo woo. You know what I
Well,
mean?
yeah, no, totally. And you know what you just said? If you take out the word DMT and apply God, it's exactly how
Mm-hmm.
I feel about religion. And the gurus
Yeah.
of, yeah, we're just humans. There's no way we can understand if there is a God. There's no way we can understand the complexity of God and it's in how we're here, where we're going. And it's good to be skeptical, right? But it's also good to be open to the possibility that there is something greater than ourselves and greater than our understanding. But then you have, your religious people, your extremists, who are just, completely overwhelmed with their God and their concepts of God. And then you have like on the other side, your extreme atheists, which just discredit everything. Everything has to be proven scientifically. Everything can't be measured. And this must be, fake or wrong. So yeah, I mean, if you just take out the word what you just said, and apply God instead of DMT, it's the exact same thing. And I think that is interesting. There's definitely a similarity there. And there's nothing wrong with knowing that we're just stupid monkeys. We really are. I mean, we're just out of our infancy.
Yeah.
500 years ago, we were still burning people at stake for witchcraft, mainly women, and 500 years ago, we thought the world
Yeah.
was flat, right? And now look at where we're at. We're like
Yeah.
launching satellites and, Hubble telescopes and all that shit. Now we're realizing how big and vast and how much we have no fucking clue what the fuck we know. You know what I'm saying? And we were convinced we knew what the fuck
Yeah.
was going on 500 years ago. And just as we're convinced we know what's going on right now, but we really don't. And it'd be great. I would love to think that DMT is somehow like the God molecule. I would love to think that because it seems to be a shared chemical within so many living things that it could be some sort of fabric throughout living organisms on this planet, which may have some sort of root in our origins, and possibly and even beyond. And that would be great to think. But yeah, it is also good to be skeptical and think that maybe those aren't aliens. Maybe those are subconscious projections because aliens are popular in our subculture. Maybe this is that. Maybe it's just a really different psychedelic experience, and we're thinking aliens because almost everybody who's tried DMT has heard these stories before. So maybe
Yeah.
you did it and you dip down the subconscious as a reflex. It throws up something to explain what's going on. which is what we've heard around us from Joe Rogan and from other stories, whatever. What else? I'm open to both of them. That's
Yeah.
good. It's good to be open to both.
Yeah, man. I heard that there's this psychiatrist very famous for his speeches, and his name's Jordan Peterson. I don't know if you've heard of him, but somebody was asking him one time in an interview if he believed in God, and I really liked his response to that, because what he said was, "Well, I don't know how to answer that question because I don't know how you define believe, and I also don't know how you define God." And I thought that was a very good way to sort of like wrap that up, because you're right, like God is this very loaded word. Like what the fuck does that even mean? Because there's so many different deities and ways that people describe it as a spirit or whatever it is. But the thing that I really love about DMT in this universe is the fact that it's not something that like I have to ask you to believe in, or have to ask anybody else to believe in. It's like, here's this thing where you can have this direct experience for yourself, and then from there you can, sort of form your own opinion on it. But yeah, and we're starting to see like, with these things becoming more popular and people realizing, oh, like this could help me with my fucking mental health and my spiritual health and my exploration of myself and all these different things. It's becoming more mainstream in our society, but it's very interesting to me to see how many of these like Western men are taking a hold of this, and there's this trend of like, shamans and fake gurus and facilitators taking advantage of people. Um, and so, like, how do you feel about the whole realm of like psychedelics becoming legalized and medicalized and used here in Western society?
Uh, um, well, yeah, the profiteering of psychedelics it's going to exist, right? I mean, it's going to exist from a medical standpoint and from medical science. Well, in the banner of medical science, but it's also going to be, from the drug dealer on the side of the street, and it's going to be from the guy who's making shirts, and it's going to be, from the guy who's monetizing his YouTube psychic whatever that was, I mean, it's going to be that's going to happen. I mean, I think, I don't know, man. It's still in its infancy. I hope that it's going to be great. I hope that they're going to legalize, psychedelics for medicinal use, at least for medicinal use. I think they should be legalized all around, but at least for medicinal use. And I see that coming in states. I just signed a petition here in California to put some psychs. I think it was just mushrooms at this point. But any bit starts, and I mean, but you got to be cautious though too, because people might sell it as like this miracle drug, like they overemphasize it. It's cure all. It's cure depression, cure anxiety, cure schizophrenia, and it's like no, not necessarily. It could make things worse for some people, but yeah, I mean, science will tell. I hope, and hopefully the trend will open more doors than it closes.
Yeah, no, you made a really good point. A lot of people view these things, or there's this sort of misrepresentation sometimes that they're like these magical silver bullets, these magical cure-alls for people's issues. And I mean, maybe there is like some people out there who've had like one trip, and that one trip just completely changed everything itself. But I think for the majority of people, what it's doing is it's allowing them to kind of dive into their subconscious. They're offered like this window of neuroplasticity to make changes and sort of to like get a positive snowball effect going. And it's, I think we're also kind of playing on the placebo effect in a way with psychedelic drugs, and it's just this beautiful sort of orchestra and piece of art around the placebo experience. It's this like beautiful way to interact with the placebo. I don't think that's all that's going on, but I think that's a part of it that people aren't addressing as well. Because if you can do just about anything, any sort of modality, take any sort of supplement, and if you gear your mind in the right way, that like, I want to become better, or this thing is going to help me become better in this way, like a lot of times that will happen. There's a reason why the placebo effect has to be accounted for in like every controlled study. But yeah, and like, you're right, they also, while they hold the potential to help people a lot, I've talked to plenty of people, and I've even seen a few friends go down squirrely paths because they interacted with these things, and I don't know if you would say like an irresponsible way, or maybe it just wasn't at the right time. Maybe they didn't need to touch psychedelic drugs at all, but because of the sort of glorification and push that can happen with these things, some people feel this weird like universal external pressure to try them and to have that experience, when maybe they didn't need to have it at all, But okay, so like you took this 30 hits of acid. If someone was going to approach you, right, and say, all right, Zach, 30 hits of acid guy, I plan on this weekend taking 30 hits of acid myself, and there's nothing you can say that's going to change my mind or make me not do that thing. What sort of advice would you give them so that they could have the sort of safest and most efficacious experience possible with that?
Yeah, if I couldn't deter them from doing such a dose, I would suggest that one, you're in a comfortable environment, comfortable surrounding, like where you are. You don't need to go very far to get whatever you could possibly think you might need, whether it's a drink, whether it's to eat, whether it's to go to the bathroom. Definitely go to the bathroom first, because that will be on your mind at some point, and you may not have the fortitude to actually make it to the toilet. So I mean, make sure you're comfortable. I would suggest possibly having somebody around, somebody that you like, and you don't have any weird resentments towards. Don't get your best friend who fucked your girlfriend, 8 months ago, because that could fuck your trip up. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't get anybody you're related to, because that's all the fucking Freudian shit there. Just yeah, and make sure you have a lot of drinks. A lot of drinks, you're gonna be really thirsty, and eventually you're gonna get hungry after you're done puking. And and that's it, man. Change of clothes, definitely a couple pairs of underwear, just in case you can't make it. And that's it, man. And if you're religious, bring a Bible. If you're not, definitely have some benzos, because I mean that's bailed me out of a few bad trips. Not just a 30 hit strip, but benzo and NyQuil are your friends. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting, because they could kill you too, but benzos and NyQuil can be a helpful person if you come across a dark corner and you just can't back your way out of it. Well, a couple of Xanax bars and a shot of NyQuil will back your ass out pretty quick. So, just saying.
Yeah.
Or kill you.
Yeah, no, and I feel like some people might be against that, like the whole like keep Xanax on standby because of that notion of, if you're having a bad experience, it's usually for a reason, like you should feel into that. And like, I do agree with that, but at the same time, I'm also agree with like personal sovereignty and learning what works for you, you know what I mean? And so if do feel like you as a person are better off having Xanax on standby so that you don't have to endure some sort of traumatic event, then yeah, it's like let's use the sort of tools at our disposal here and be some DMT.
You should be able to tap out, right? Like
Yeah.
as the coach, I'm going to say, don't tap out, keep fighting, push past it. But if I'm in the ring and I'm getting my ass beat, I want the ability to tap out. If Tank Abbott's fucking
Yeah.
I don't care what fucking Joe Rogan says. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to tap out. Whatever.
Hell yeah, brother. Hell yeah. You say I'm Zach. I don't need your fucking permission. I'm taking this goddamn Xanax. I'm going to sleep. Fuck you guys. Dude, like an acid is such when you punch that ticket, dude, like you've punched that fucking ticket for the next 16 hours or whatever the fuck it is. It's a very long experience.
That's why I like DMT so much, right? Is because
Yeah.
it's over. It's over in 10 or 15 minutes, right? Regardless. Whereas acid, like you said, you punch that ticket, man, you're in it for 12, 16 hours. Even I've had some that gone up 24 without not even including 30. So like, even just like I taken 2 tabs that haven't, I don't know what, something I ate, but it was like 24 hours later, I'm like, fuck, I'm still fucking high. I gotta go to work. It's like, at that point, I wish I would have taken a 12-hour, point, it's like,
Yeah.
It's to each their own, man. And I never shame anybody for tapping out, though, man, because like people could say that maybe well, you can't handle it, maybe you took too much, maybe go back to the fucking put your fucking training wheels on. Well, your teeth are falling out of your face and blood is coming out of your eyes, and you're on fire. You might want to reconsider like that Xanax might be pretty good at that point. You know what I'm saying? we
Yeah.
can talk about stuff later on, but
Yeah, and I feel like anybody who is truly experienced with psychedelics, like a true psychonaut, whatever you want to call it, they at some point have had a tough experience themselves. Like I feel like that's almost part of like the path there is like part of the rite of passage in my mind to being like considered a psychonaut is you've had some of those like bad experiences that you've gone through. And so for anybody to like hold that space for others of like, wow, you should like get your shit together and not have a bad time or whatever it is, it's like one thing that I've noticed, man, is like it seemed like back in the day I could take mushrooms and like sometimes there was some work involved, but there was more of a recreational side to it. And it still has that for me. But it seems like more often than not nowadays when I take mushrooms, it's like, oh, like these little fuckers, like they're making me work today, like in a good way, truly in a good way. But it's not like this super pretty. I mean, and there is that too. It's just like that. Seems like there is a lot of work to be done in that space. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's interesting like how my relationship to some of these things has seemed to evolve as I have evolved as a person. So how do you feel like your relationship with something like DMT has changed over the years and evolved since you've been interacting with it so much, man?
I have a lot more respect for it, which is why nowadays I tend not to freebase DMT very often at all anymore, just because I've had one too many bad trips on that rabbit hole, and so I like to put it in a cart because I can take a hit and still talk to you. I can take two hits that may not be able to talk to you, but I can kind of, for the most part, I can kind of base myself. Once in a while, I'll surprise myself like, what the fuck just happened there? But it's yeah, a little bit more respect for DMT, for sure, for sure. I thought I went in thinking like I knew what I was doing, like oh DMT, whatever, right? And and it's like I just didn't know how to hit the pipe right. Like at the first like month, I was just like
Yeah.
weak sauce, and then someone like, hey, try this genie thing. I'm like, what? Like,
Yeah.
that's a different animal. Yeah, so I encourage people. I encourage everybody to try it. Everybody, even people that I should not encourage, I still encourage. But you know, um, you know, it is what it is, man. And, and that the pieces fall where they may. Some people are collateral damage. Now we're just getting like a
Yeah.
dark side. But the thing with the shrooms, man, is like, and this is like with weed too. Like, I don't know. At one point I thought like, okay, maybe my mind's just getting like soft, right? Because I just take two like a boxer, right? Get hit so many times now. I'm just kind of punch drunk all the time. Like, can't really take much of a hit anymore. I thought that was what was going on for a while. Then somebody was like, broke it down to me. Was like, dude, and somebody was older than me was like, dude, when you smoked weed back in the '90s, man, like what we were calling skunk bud back then is like fucking shoot bud today. Like, that's like shit that people just throw away. That was like our best shit back then, man. Because now they have like hydroponics and they have like chemical splicing and we is like it's like not even the same drug. That's why when you take one hit, like you like two hits and like you're like panic attack, right? It's like, well, I remember in high school we used to sit there and smoke a whole fucking joint because the shit was fucking out of the dirt, and like that was it. Like, and like nowadays it's like scientists are making this shit as strong as they can. Like wax and dabs and shit. Fuck that shit. That's not weed. In my opinion. That's like to the fucking hospital. I'm having a heart attack, can't breathe. It's like, no, you're old. And there's a guy like laughing, 30 hits, you can't even take two hits of dabs. I'm like, no, I can't. Take me to the hospital. But it's like, fuck, man. I think maybe like shrooms, man. I think of that same shit, man, because like I remember like eating handfuls of that shit back in high school, and it was like an eighth. You look at an eighth, they're like an eighth. That's nothing, right? Like, come on, don't be stingy. Give me two eighths, and you get high, right? But I've tried some shrooms recently, man, from my homie that has hydroponics and like splices them and gets like these spores from like fucking weird places and mixes them with these spores and comes out with these shrooms, and it's like dude, like an eighth, I'm like in a dark place, man. I'm like fucking, I'm never gonna take shrooms again. That type of trip, man. I'm just like, what the fuck? And when I get older, these shrooms got like fucking 10 times stronger. I think it's 10 times stronger. I don't
Yeah,
know.
no, there is that sort of variation within the psilocybin mushrooms. They do the psilocybin content on them can vary quite a bit. Like I'm sure you've heard of like the penis envy mushroom strain and like how strong that one is, and that one does tend to have a higher concentration of psilocybin in it than other strains does, you know. So that makes sense, man. But yeah, so one of the things about you that I noticed just from looking at your channel and talking to you a little bit and stuff is that you are a Satanist. Is that correct?
It is. It is. I'm kind
Yes.
of a little weary to use that word anymore just because in the last
Yeah.
10, 15 years, the definition of what that is more like as soon as we got done fixing it from the 80s and 90s, satanic panic from being like baby eating child molesters, we fixed it and got it right back to where it was at. Now it's like, went back into a different direction that's all rainbows and fruity shit. And that's really not really, it's like, we had it for like 5 years and this, now it's gone again. So, but yes, I am
Yeah.
yeah, I would consider myself a Satanist in a real sense of, yeah.
Okay, so what is your definition of a Satanist?
A Satanist would pretty much be similar to an atheist. Probably more kind of like, more like a lot of an agnostic, but one that, believes that we are our own gods, that we're responsible for our own decisions. And, we look at life as not like some trial or tribulation to appease a god, but more so, to indulge and to live life to its fullest and, to be happy. Not necessarily at the expense of others, but just
Yeah.
we don't concern ourselves with frivolous imaginations from the books that were written thousands of years ago. Not to be a moral
Mhm.
guide or not to be something that we devote our lives to, but we devote our lives to ourselves and to our own fleshly pursuits and live life like this is our only one, because maybe it's not, but you know what, it could be. So might as well live it like it is, and become your
Yeah.
own God. You're responsible for your own actions, and you are your own redeemer. So that's pretty much what a Satanist is somebody who's more focused on the here and now as opposed to the afterlife and what could be.
Yeah. No, I like that. I remember I was doing a little bit of like individual research before this, looking into Satanism, and I saw someone describe it and gave this definition for it that like I really liked. And whenever I read it, I was like, "Am I a Satanist?" You know, because well, in the definition that he gave, this gentleman gave was that essentially, you know, it's not like this sort of like belief system, like this set boxed in belief system like something like organized religion. It's more so like you guys look at Satan as, and he is emblematic of this character that's essentially like, hey, we reject authority and we think for ourselves. We're sovereign human beings. And like that's the basic like sort of psychological premise of this here. You know, at least the way that this gentleman was describing it. And I really liked that because, you know, like that's, I mean, it's a story of my life, man. Like since a young age, have rejected authority. Not in turn. I haven't been a troublemaker. Haven't been like I'm not a disrespectful person by any means. I'm like the opposite of that. I'm very respectful and kind, but I don't like authority. I've never appreciated somebody else feeling like they can tell me what the fuck to do. I've always heavily rejected that. And one thing that my biological father sort of like imprinted in me from a very early age was he wanted me to think for myself, you know, and he like really stressed that to me a lot. And we would have these like long discussions, me and him, about like different aspects of life. And he really just honed that in on me, like, hey, like, you know, think for yourself out here, think for yourself. And so when I read that definition of Satanism, I was like, oh, like, yeah, like I can get, I can get behind that, you know. And it's funny because like before I had like had the incentive to Google that, and the reason why I had the incentive to Google that is because, you know, I was about to interview you. But before that, like I hadn't talked or researched Satanism or anything. But if you had to ask me before I had done that basic research of like, well, what is Satanism? I would have guessed that it's, praising some sort of demonic thing or whatever it is. And I'm sure that a lot of other people out there, I'm sure the majority of people out there who haven't looked into it probably think the same thing, that, hey, it's like this really, edgy, dark thing. And I mean, I don't know. It was interesting to me. It was like, all right, we got a bunch of free thinkers here, and I like that.
For sure, for sure. I probably should have added that when you asked me what Satanism was. Is I'm so used to talking like to people who already know what it is that I forget
Yeah.
that to go back to its base. Well, yeah, people would think Satanists are people who worship Satan. Makes sense, right? Satanism, Satan, right? People who worship Satan. Yeah, but see, the Satanists are a symbolic metaphor. We don't believe that there's an actual devil or an actual Christian Satan or a deity, a living being sort. Satan is a manifestation of ideals and principles. They're not about evil, not about hurt and pain and suffering, but more like a Faustian, like you described, like one that thinks for themselves, individualism. After all, and mythology, and when I refer to Christianity, I refer to the Bible as mythology. Mythology, Lucifer was the one who challenged the will of God and said, I will be like my own God. I will exalt myself above the stars of God, right? And so it's pride. Pride's not a bad thing. Ego's not a bad thing. The overabundance of it can be, but these are human characteristics. There's nothing wrong with being proud of what you do. Nothing wrong with having a strong ego and a sense of self-worth. Nothing wrong with wanting to strive and improve your life and to rise above. And definitely nothing wrong with challenging authority and challenging them. That's how we live, and Lucifer's that, just the adversary. Satan itself, the word Satan in Hebrew means adversary. He wasn't necessarily a bad guy. If you want to go back and get into mythology, he was one of the chosen angels that was to be the adversary. And, that's a good thing. He's also the imparter of wisdom in mythology. So these things we look at as symbolic representations of what we call Satan. So Satanism is the manifestation of these ideals. Ism means action, put into action. So we don't worship the devil. We don't believe in the devil like Christians do. We're, Satanists.
Yeah.
Which the whole definition got more confused now in the last 10 years because of the Satanic Temple and the whole LGBT influence and the whole that mess, but they had good. Yeah, I'm not going to talk. But it was but yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. So yeah, I mean, it's
Yeah, no.
they kind of got me. That's kind of where I started. When I got into Satanism, is also when I got into psychedelics. It's not just 13, 14, which is usually when people start to really make a push to themselves because, coincidence, that's what puberty really starts to get your gear right around there, right? That's really when your body and your mind start to change in a way that's almost unimaginable. Like you almost have no control. It's like becoming a werewolf, kind of like, it's like, and it's like, I just wanted to experience the unknown. I wanted to see the world, in a different way, which is what attracted me to psychs, because it was like, oh, LSD can make you hallucinate. What? You can see things that aren't really there. What? What the fuck does that mean? I don't even.
Yeah.
You can't even tell somebody what a hallucination is who's never hallucinated. Right? You can't really describe that. You see reality and experience the world in a different way. What I wanted to, it's the unknown, basically, is what attracted me to that. That's what attracted me to Satanism. In the early 90s, it was a satanic panic. It was like Richard Ramirez, AC/DC, Slayer. It was like evil, like, eat babies, drink blood, like, stupid shit like that. And I was like, no way. Like, but there was this weird, like, that's the unknown. It's like, there's really people that do that shit, where everybody else is running to church. I'm like, I don't even believe it. Let me go check these people out. And it's like, then I was like, wow, this is not even close to what I believe. That conception was what the religious people wanted you to think it was. It wasn't what it was. And it was just like, then I just basically just said, religion's all bullshit. It's all bullshit. It's all about organizing people, brainwashing. I'm not saying it's bad to be a spiritual person, because spirituality is not bad. The belief in something greater than ourselves is not bad at all. In fact, it can be very rewarding, and it can be move people and a culture forward. But organized religion, bad. Bibles, bad. Written by man, bad. Word of God, no, it's not. Because we created God. Do that. It's the other way around.
It sounds like, and that's one of the issues with something like organized religion is what happens is whenever you then become a part of that and your identity is intrinsically attached to that thing, then all of a sudden, like, you can't, you're boxed into that way of thinking, right? And so, like, when it comes to religion and church and all that, like, I think there's a lot of good in there. Like, like, for instance, with Christianity, like, I think there's a lot of good within the teachings, inside of it, but it gets manipulated and controlled in a certain way that I think makes it extremely unhealthy, and you're just breeding fear into people, trying to control and manipulate them, But like what you're describing, sort of Satanism, using that as a modality to keep that box open and to constantly sort of question and think for yourself. Like I think that's extremely important, man. Like I remember I don't remember how I came across this, but there's this, it's somewhat similar to Satanism. It's called omnism, or you can be an omnist, which essentially just means that you see the truth, like you find these little nuggets of truth within all religions and belief systems, but you don't subscribe to any particular one because you know that that's like you're mistaking a tree for the forest, if that makes sense, So yeah, dude, I really like that.
Absolutely. And you know what? You're right. I mean, I don't, people ask me as a Satanist, do you hate Christians? It's like, no, I don't. And there are some good values about Christianity and the fundamental teachings, like say the golden rule. Golden rule is great. I mean, so intrinsically, that's a great value to have. Do unto others as, as you would have them do unto you. Unfortunately, man, it's corrupt, and it doesn't work that way. I mean, if everybody does it, then it'd be a beautiful society. But unfortunately, too many scoundrels and fucking ass clowns to fuck that up. And now it's kind of almost has to be like do unto others as they do unto you. So basically, give people the kindness and respect, up front. But if they treat you otherwise, they don't reciprocate that. Do unto others as they do unto you.
Yeah.
If you're an asshole, you be an asshole back. I mean, because if otherwise you're going to go around and just get taken advantage of. If you just, put your heart forward, which is the kind thing to do and the right thing to do. But we don't live in that world, unfortunately. Religious thing, Christianity, Buddhism is a great philosophy. In fact, like, I'll let you know a little secret. After 20 years of being a Satanist and studying the occult, pull back the veil, the mystery of Satanism, the Halloween costumes. When you take off the Halloween costumes, right? At the end, you find Buddha. I shouldn't say that because that could be 20 years older than that, but that's a little secret thing.
No, that's very interesting you just said that, because there is something about the sort of like Eastern practices and belief system that has always resonated with me. Not that I'm a Buddhist or not that I'm a Hindu or anything like that, but there, not only like the sort of teachings there, but also the psychedelic experience itself. It's very common for me to see visions and imagery that are, very similar to some of the things that you would see depicted, the symbology and the mythology around some of these Eastern, Buddhism and Hinduism. Like on one of my DMT trips, I met this being who literally looked, and I'm almost convinced was Lord Indra, one of the like Hindu demigods. And that's not the only time that I've met like these Hindu looking type of gods and been to these like Hindu looking type of places. And so that's an interesting thing I've experienced is the sort of underlying, like, if you think about the origins of religion, right? And like, where did this come from? It came from people with stories, essentially. Now, were these people tapping into that sort of psychedelic state in order to then espouse that, and then their religion snowballed from there? I don't know, but that's definitely a big theory out there behind like the origins of all, if not most, religions is the sort of psychedelic underpinnings there. So yeah, and like I'm with you too, man. Like I believe in that sort of fundamental law of reciprocation, and I'm a very I'm legitimately one of like the nicest people you'll ever meet in terms of, like I give everybody a chance, but I do think at the same time there's a time and place for that sort of like sacred aggression. And there has been a few times now where I've had to express my sacred aggression because a motherfucker out there thought that, they mistook my kindness for stupidity, felt like they could take advantage of me or something. And it's in those moments you realize, oh, this shit isn't all airy-fairy as much as we would like it to be. Let's hold the space for the airy-fairiness and try and make things as positive and, settle things without violence as much as possible. But there's also human beings in this world who have the intention to, and if allowed, they will cause harm to me or people who I love. And that's where I draw the line. It's like I will show you kindness, but if you're if you're gonna fuck with me or fuck with somebody I love, like that's when you'll feel my sacred aggression.
Well, exactly. And, an example could be like, I mean, as humans, we have certain rights. There should be a certain amount of general universal laws of kindness and this and that. But then you meet people like who rape children and kill children. Those people don't deserve anything other than death and on the spot, even. You know what I mean? That's just, the bleeding hearts be like, well, they might be sick. It's like, well, yeah, but say that to the person, to the father whose daughter just got raped and annihilated by this fucking predator. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
people just don't deserve any sort of anything other than death. But
Yeah.
you brought up an interesting point though, like the DMT collectiveness, like the theories like Jung had like, collective unconsciousness, synchronicity. When we get, it's possible that maybe DMT touches on a certain primordial collective unconsciousness that may even go back thousands and thousands of years, which may be somewhat responsible for these archetypes to come forward and stuff like that. And we may be able to touch on the basis of certain origins of us evolving as a species, as humans, with the collective unconsciousness, and even on a biological level, on the chromosomes. I mean, who knows? I mean, we're just now scratching the surface because these drugs are unfortunately considered, class 1 drugs, and they don't get any funding from the government, so they don't get a lot of research. And like LSD, what's starting just has only gone on the last 10, 20 years. It got halted because of some stupid bullshit political laws about, war on drugs and, drugs are bad and okay. And it's like, it's sad because it's kind of like religion does on science. Science got put its brakes on because people didn't want to die when the church was in power, saying that this is the devil's tool. This is the devil. It's like, what? So, fuck. We could be like living on Mars right now if it wasn't for the witch trials and people being burned at the stake because they have moles on their bodies, and shit like that. It went on for hundreds of years in this fucking country. People forget this. The last person to be legally put to death for witchcraft was like in the late or early 1800s. Not that long ago, man. It's like people fucking, a
You,
lot of good people died.
you know,
9 million people were legally put to death for witchcraft in the United States.
what's crazy about this, man? You know what's crazy about this? In this conversation's like already starting to come full circle. Is you're talking about people being put to death for witchcraft. A lot of people theorize that a lot of these witches and stuff, what they were toying with, not all of them, but is ergot fungus. And so for people who don't know, that's where LSD actually comes from, is a certain like ergot fungus. And, people back in the day, like, they either would mistakenly, based on like certain conditions of their crops and moisture levels and things like that, mistakenly ingest LSA, which is about a 4 to 6 hour long experience, very similar to LSD. It's that it naturally occurs within that ergot fungus. So they were either mistakenly doing this, or they had figured out, hey, when we make this wine in a certain way with these crops that have been, manipulated in this way, we have this connection to God over here, or this sacrament over here. And if you think about something as medieval as the church back then, imagine people saying, hey, fuck you. We don't need to pay all this money and give into your thing. We have this little brew here, this little wine that we can make that it is our connection to God. And like this goes back far. Like, a lot of people theorize that the ancient Greeks was a sort of psychedelic tradition itself, and that's what they were doing was drinking this psychedelic wine with the LSA. Some people theorize that's who Jesus Christ was, more or less, is this dude who was walking around as like a psychedelic drug dealer, showing people how to make their own LSA brews and spreading that message and trying to remind people that, hey, like this is your own direct connection to God here. And then of course it gets when you have thousands of years in the way and hundreds of people who have messed with the text and reinterpreted it and all these different things and are incentivized by greed and money, it makes sense how you could go somewhere, you could start off somewhere with people taking LSA and a psychedelic brew talking about, hey, we're communing with God, and then 2,000 years later you have this completely distorted, message going on.
For sure. And like, if you think about like several hundreds of years ago, especially early colonial days, food was kind of scarce. I mean, it wasn't exact science. It wasn't a way to preserve food very well anyway. At least not like there is today. I mean, it's not too far to believe that people out there picking fucking mushrooms off the fucking forest floor. And I don't doubt that maybe some of those motherfuckers, before they knew which ones were psychedelics, which ones were poisonous, which ones made you fucking ill, which ones were good, yummy, and which ones made you trip balls. They probably didn't know what the trip balls ones were. They probably didn't think, oh, that's what the fucking mushrooms we ate with that fucking pizza or whatever, right? It's like, they're like, we just trip balls, right? Now the devil must have fucking came to fucking dinner, right? And everybody here is tripping balls and saw what I saw, this fucking, yeah, I mean, maybe psychedelics, unknowingly ingesting psychedelics could be part of the witch craze. It really could have been. It could have been, like you said, and the crops too, the mold in the crops. It could have been a lot of things, man. Hard to say, man. It could have been a psychiatrist say like this hysteria that started off with sexual repression that got, fucking this. Who knows, man? It's a strange time, but people need to remember that was only a few hundred years ago, man. It was only not even that long ago. I mean, it was think of where we'll be in a few hundred years from now. I mean, man is evolving, even genetically. They said that the last, I think it was 1,000 years, we evolved like on a chromosomal level, like exponentially, just in the more recent time, like the last 1,000 years, and then like in our whole heritage. So we are evolving very, very fast as a species, and who knows where we're going to be. The beliefs that we hold on to dear today, we know as truths, may not be, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, maybe looked at as fairy tales, which is kind of what I'm thinking the Bible was at that time. So, but we'll see. There's some sinister left in the Satanists. There's a little bit of that, but yeah, it's all for the good in the long run in a Darwinian sense. So.
Yeah. And I mean, with any sort of religion or belief system or whatever it is, like there is radicals in any of those things. And if you were to focus on and hone in and use the radicals as an example of the entire group, then you could portray Christianity or any other religion as the most evil, despicable thing on the face of the planet itself. So, yeah, man, I was very, interested in hearing your take on Satanism, and I appreciate you sharing that with us and stuff. But yeah, dude, so if anyone wants to check out your stuff, Zach, where can they check out your stuff at?
Oh, right on, man. Yeah, I've got two YouTube channels. I got one, which was my first one, Satanic International, which I started just the 2008, 2009, basically to be an educational channel for Satanism, and basically to debunk a lot of the rumors and stuff like that, and to kind of just put Satanism out there in a factual way. I did that, but back then I got a lot of haters, still a lot of haters, but back then it was like rampant false flag, and the channel kept getting deleted and suspended. So I created another channel, which is now called Zach Black, which has more personal stuff about, experiences with drugs and storytelling, and just, it's a more wide, broadband channel, which is probably the more popular one now, which is Zach Black on YouTube. There's only two. One of them is
Nice.
white, one of them is actually black. I'm the white one. Same name. I almost think I
Nice.
just but,
Yeah, no, for anybody watching, I'll make sure I put all of Zach's links and socials and stuff down in the description below. But yeah, man, appreciate you coming on the Launchpad podcast and gonna have to have you on again, man.
for sure, man. Yeah, we could keep going on for another hour, but yeah, for sure, man. We'll do a
Yeah.
round two in the near future. Come back with some fresh
Yeah,
stuff.
man.
I'd like to go back into the collective unconsciousness and synchronicity and stuff like that. And now that DMT could be
Yeah.
touching into the fabric of that, because that kind of gets on some really speculative shit that has kind of a scientific grounding, that kind of
Yeah.
might be kind of deep, might be a little above some people's heads, including mine, but it's worth talking about.